Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, West Ham under investigation after 4 separate pitch invasions at the London Stadium in their 3-0 defeat against Burnley yesterday. The magic is back. Mourinho serves up a masterclass. It's 2 goals from Marcus Rashford to help Manchester United beat Liverpool at Old Trafford yesterday. And Tottenham, they tried to shake off their Champions League defeat against Juventus when they travel to Bournemouth later today. Here to discuss all that and much more this morning, Sam Wallace is the chief football writer at The Telegraph. Jeremy Cross is the chief sports writer with the Daily Star. John Cross is the chief football writer at the Daily Mirror. Is there too many crosses on this table? You'll be able to tell us. Don't forget, you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on your screen over the next 90 minutes. Morning, boys. Good to see you as ever. OK, let's have a look at some of the papers this morning. Back page of the Mail on Sunday. It's dominated. Every paper's dominated by the Hammers and their day of shame. 4 pitch invasions. The fans threaten the owners. The ground could be closed. The FA and the Premier League and West Ham have all opened investigations into yesterday's affairs at the London Stadium. Revolting. That's the back page of the People this morning. Different headlines, same story. It's anarchy at the London Stadium. That's the Sunday Mirror. Sam's paper, The Telegraph. West Ham anarchy as the fans run riots. We're coming on to that story straight away. We'll come on to this one in part 2 of today's programme. And it's Rashford, Marcus Rashford, the star turn for Manchester United. Scored twice yesterday. An excellent victory for Jose Mourinho and Manchester United against their old rivals, Liverpool. Andy Dunn's column, a regular and a good friend of ours here on the Sunday Supplement. An England squad being named by Gareth Southgate on Thursday for the games against Italy and Holland. What about England's underperforming stars, though? John Stones on the substitutes bench for Manchester City at the moment. Ben Forster, Fraser Forster, all out the England side at the moment. Danny Rose, substitute for Tottenham against Juventus in midweek at Wembley. The Stars back page, the shame at West Ham, but also scary. Mourinho taunting Gary Neville after yesterday's victory over Liverpool. We'll come on to that shortly. Toon over the moon, big win for them yesterday at St James's Park. But let's talk West Ham first of all, Sam, and events yesterday that unfolded. Thoughts on the manner of the protests and the way that some West Ham supporters, we should make clear, and the way that they conducted themselves yesterday. What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not nice to see or to read about stewards who presumably don't earn loads of money being knocked over. It's not nice to see children being sheltered in the dugout, at the Burnley dugout. And obviously there's sort of a bit of a head-in-hands moment when middle-aged man gets on the pitch and starts waving a flag around. So in our country, we have, in our past in football, we have hooliganism, and rightly, when people are aggressive or where people don't feel safe in a football stadium, we react against that. And that's right, because it took us many years to get rid of that from the game. And so normally the bottom line is we don't condone violence, and of course we don't want to see people hurt or frightened or any of those things. I would say, on the other side of it, fans have a right to protest. And I think often in protests things get out of hand and not everyone behaves well. So looking at the back pages today, obviously people feel very strongly about what's happened, and it's wrong that people you run on the pitch. That's a red line. You know, that should not happen. It's wrong that children feel in danger. My brother was at the game, actually. He's a West Ham fan, and he took his son for his first match, which was a hell of an introduction to life as a West Ham fan. Some people might say that actually it's a pretty comprehensive one. And he left before the end because the side of the stadium that he was in, people were running onto the pitch. And then when they came back into the stand, there were fights because obviously not everyone agrees. So I think the pictures are very stark, but I would go back to my point that this is a club where the fans are very, very unhappy, and there are tens of thousands of West Ham fans who disagree with the way that the stadium move has been undertaken, the way that the squad has been managed, the way the messages that they've got from the ownership of Sullivan Gold and also from Karen Brady, and they feel that they've been lied to. And lots of those fans don't run on the pitch, they don't throw coins, they don't knock stewards over, and they have legitimate grievances. So I think when we analyse this over the next few days, absolutely people need to be punished for doing things that endanger other supporters. but we should not lose sight of the fact that football fans in this country have always had the right to protest. They've always had the right to say to owners, no, this is enough, we're fed up with this, we don't want you anymore. And to be honest, there's a pretty strong tradition of that, and I would never want to see that go. And I would always want fans to stand up for their clubs. But we have to balance that with putting other people in danger. So I would say to those fans that run on the pitch that that's wrong, that does send a very bleak message, but that should not detract from the fact that people have legitimate grievances.
Mm. Has this been coming, Jeremy?
Yeah,
there's been
an undercurrent at West Ham pretty much all season. Like Sam said, the ownership, it all comes back to the ownership of the club. Clearly, they are two very unpopular guys.
Why? Why are they so unpopular? They're West Ham. They say they're West Ham supporters.
Yeah, part of the problem is the fans feel like the club have lost their identity a little bit moving to London Stadium. It's been a fiasco with all sorts of well-publicised issues with that move there, and there's been a chronic underinvestment in the squad. I mean, I think they've got a net spend of less than 30 million quid this season, West Ham. When you look at that by Premier League standards, that is pittance, really. So, and they have a mediocre team with, there's not a lot of talent in that team, really, and they are where they are for a reason. So, like Sam said, I think that a lot of fans think that they feel like they've been lied to by Gold and Sullivan.
In what way, though, Jeremy? Because I just want to point out that in terms of transfers, just take aside the net spend, but they spent £80 million on players in 2016, 2017, so that's something that they would automatically point to. They've doubled their wages over the last couple of years, so there is an investment there's unquestionably investment in the side. The players might not be good enough. There might not be the quality of the calibre of player that they wanted to attract or they thought they were buying, but they have invested money.
But just to come in on that, I mean, the message was unquestionably in the years leading up to the London Stadium move that this was going to transform West Ham. Yeah. They were going to be at the top table now, and they were going to be challenging for the European League. Now I know things don't always work out in football. But I heard an interview with David Sullivan saying that actually it only adds about 8 million to revenues every year. The new stadium move. That's not transformative at all. And you only have to look at the list of there was the police radio. Do you remember that when they didn't have a police radio system installed?
Yeah.
Then when I think in sort of the Chelsea game in early sort of October 2016, they transitioned the fans to the wrong parts of the stadium, so there were fans that wanted to sing next to fans
Security
that
issues.
Didn't want to, and there were fights between. So of course, fans do have to take responsibility for their own behaviour. I understand that, but a stadium move for a club that has been established in its home for years and years is a very, very delicate thing.
Well, they made a lot of money, didn't they, with the sale of the old stadium?
I don't know how much
and
they made,
but peppercorn rent.
Yes, but the value, certainly the value of owning West Ham has gone up now that they have this stadium. So as a commodity, West Ham is worth more.
I don't think, though, you see, what's happened in recent times with football is that we thought we were moving into an age whereby if you have a larger stadium, a much bigger supporter base and attendances, that would fuel the football club. And basically everything was aimed towards whoever it might be, whether it's Tottenham, West Ham or whoever, thought that moving to a huge, big stadium would transform their fortunes. Now that era has changed, that importance has gone. Of course you want to be playing to a bigger stadium, of course you want bigger fans, of course. But that importance in terms of actually how the club is profitable and how it grows, is that emphasis has gone on the bigger stadium. Is now much more important, obviously, the TV revenue. So the TV revenue dictates your budget much more. And so that era has changed. And during this time, when obviously West Ham were vying for the stadium, we felt that actually a club's success, or otherwise, would be governed by how big the stadium is. And I just think that era has changed. Look,
okay, the size of the stadium, the size of the stadium and the revenue is great for the money men, the guys who are in charge of the club. The Golden Sullivan example, Karen Brady. But how do you convince the supporters that the stadium move is the right thing to do. So to leave Upton Park for the London Stadium, because if we look at other recent historical examples, Stoke City moving from the Victoria Ground to their new stadium, Bet365, Bolton Wanderers, Burnden Park to the Reebok. They've successfully convinced their supporters that this move is right, and now I think we would look at Bolton and consider the Reebok as home, Bet365 Stadium. That's home for those supporters. Why haven't West Ham been able to do the same with their supporters and convince them?
Well, if you go to Stoke, for example, you will enjoy, I'm not sure that all sort of away fans do, but basically a raucous atmosphere, a loud atmosphere, the fans are behind their team, and it can inspire Stoke to really big results. And it's a big part of Stoke
but it's not
City
home.
Football Club.
It's not their traditional, it's not the home that we would associate
They've
Stoke City
made
with.
it their home, Neil.
Tradition
That's the
only
point.
comes through years of being there, though.
But that's
The
what I'm saying.
longevity.
I think the Stoke...
Do you know what I mean?
Stoke fan base there have made it their own home. They made it an intimidating atmosphere, and it's a good place to be. And I like going to Stoke because basically you do feel that atmosphere. Tomorrow night, when they entertain Man City, you will feel tension in the ground, you will feel it's loud, you will feel it's intimidating. It's a good place to go. It really is. But West Ham, it's totally different. West Ham's fans used to be right on top of the pitch.
There's a gap in there.
Yeah, absolutely, at Upton Park, and it was a really good place to go. They used to love it, and they're sort of rabid fans. They're some of the best fans around, and they used to inspire their team. It used to be a really good atmosphere. It used to be absolutely rocking, and basically they've changed. They traded that in. A lot of the West Ham fans didn't want it at all. So let's not kid ourselves that a lot of fans were persuaded why it was a good thing to the Olympic Stadium, because it wasn't. They didn't buy into it. Those that have, I think, even the majority of those that bought into it to a degree, have gone there, they've found a soulless, empty athletic stadium, which is completely a mess. It's been badly introduced, it's been badly run. So it seems to me...
You covered the Olympics, Crossy. You went to the Olympics.
It was amazing.
OK, so what's the difference between the atmosphere for the Olympic Games?
The big difference here is that all the stadiums we're talking about is they were all built for football. So Bolton Stadium. Yeah. I don't actually think it's called the Reebok anymore. I hate to. I'm trying to switch through my head.
All the people on this table are going to pick me up.
It's not the Macron, is it? I could be wrong there, but it is
the Macron. Yeah.
So the Macron. So. Bet365, all these grounds were built for football, and the problem with West Ham Stadium was that it was built for an Olympics. There was no legacy plan. That was a shambles. It was always going to have to be football to be the anchor tenant. It cost £272 million to convert it. It cost £8 million to get those retractable seats back, because British Athletics have got a 50-year agreement to stage athletics there. It's been a terrible compromise that doesn't seem to have worked out for anyone, least of all the taxpayer.
West Ham were like an afterthought, basically.
They were, but I mean, the Legacy Development Corporation needed a club because nothing else is going to fill that stadium. Daniel Levy's plan, do you remember his plan was to knock it down and build it again?
And it was the right thing to do.
It was probably the right thing to, but it would have horrified, because it would have been an example of football trampling over the legacy of 2012 and other sports in Britain. So I understand why it didn't happen, but right from the offset, it just felt like a plan that there wasn't a plan, and West Ham were thrown in there, and they took their chance because obviously the deal looked great. And I'm afraid it's very hard to turn a stadium like that. It's not just the stadium itself. It's sort of the walk to the stadium as well, isn't it? At some point you find yourself crossing a dual carriageway and railway lines.
Shopping centre.
Yes,
it's
it feels like it doesn't feel rooted in a community. And
it's
of
a world
course,
away from Upton Park.
It is. And of course, these things take time. And look at Arsenal. I mean, they haven't won a league title in the Emirates, and it still doesn't. There's still part of it. They've won trophies while they've been there, but they haven't won one on the pitch, have they? There's not. So it still feels like there's a bit of a disconnect there. And I understand that in 50 years' time, you might have the Sunday Supplement guest will be looking back and say, "What were we worried about? What were West Ham worried about?" Of course, it worked out. It's difficult when you're actually in the moment to try and see the bigger picture. But there's no doubt that some of the that many of the concerns that the fans have are real and legitimate. Obviously, the way that some of them expressed it yesterday was totally unacceptable.
The saddest part yesterday, obviously, is the fact that it was the 25th anniversary of Bobby Moore's death.
Yeah, it was.
And his daughter was on the side of the pitch at the start.
I must say, I thought yesterday you could divide it into two. You're never going to condone pitch invasions, of course, you're not. But I must say that kind of, in watching some of it, people were describing this sort of the baying mob, if I can describe it that, below the director's box, sort of as an absolute disgrace and kind of shameful scenes. Well, how else are they going to make their point? I mean, they didn't want to be there in the first place. And while I'm never going to condone, you know, there's reports this morning in some of the papers that David Sullivan was hit by a coin or a coin thrown at him and only his glasses protected him from being hit. Well, you're never going to condone that. But I must say, for the vast majority of West Ham fans are passionate and behind their team. Yes, they're very frustrated, but there's a small minority, obviously, that were making their protest yesterday. And I would ask, how else are you going to make your point to some of these owners? You don't want to see, like, angry, violent confrontations like we had at Swansea last week when a group of fans confronted David Gold outside his car, for example. But if you're going to make that point to him, I don't think there's too much wrong in that. And I don't think there's also too much wrong in them being very loud by the director's box and making that point. Because how else are they going to make it? I don't actually think there's too much.
The more concerning aspect was those who got on the pitch.
Yeah,
because the players were exposed. How can
but
one...
will you ever be able to stop?
But it's not like it was a baying mob that went on. It wasn't like a pitch invasion. It was one individual or four separate individuals. So how can one... Where's the security? How can that be allowed to happen? There must be some... I mean, that will be looked at by the FA.
But by the same token, West Ham wouldn't expect right-minded individuals to run onto the pitch during the game.
No, but you can't expect to have a game and expect everyone in the stadium to be a right-minded individual, can you? You know,
not even in the press box.
Well, otherwise you'd never have police or stewards, would you?
Martin Noble tackled it. I mean, I thought for everything that went on yesterday, and it was such a sad thing to witness, the one person who measured any morsel of credit was Martin Noble, because I thought what he did was, you know, he was standing up for himself and his teammates, and he grappled that guy to the ground. I've never seen anything like that before.
He did speak well after the game.
And he spoke well afterwards. He fronted up. He is captain, so, you know, he does have that duty, but he spoke well and he was honest and candid about it.
Yeah, OK.
So credit to him.
We could talk for a lot longer about this. Unfortunately, time's beaten us. But, Sam, just to finish off, what is the appropriate punishment for West Ham? What are the sanctions that we can expect to see imposed by the FA? And also, what is the solution?
Wow, that is a big question. I think they're facing a game behind closed doors.
Yeah, me too.
And it pains me because to say it, but I think that will probably be the right decision, because it is something that fans on the pitch is just it creates an atmosphere of I use the word anarchy and where people, and you have to think of your staff, of the stewards, you have to think of everyone in the stadium, and if you can't control the people who are coming on the pitch, then the chances are you can't control the stands. So I think that probably has to happen.
Would that be a punishment though?
Well, they've got some big games. I think it would be Southampton, wouldn't it? Which is a massive game.
Yeah.
And then your second part of your question, which is what's the solution? The club's got to be better run, and whether this ownership are the ones to do it is a big question. But I think if part of their investigation, they need to look at themselves as well, the ownership.
Yeah, sure. OK, lots of fallout to come over the next few days on that West Ham story. OK, next up, Sam and Jeremy were both at Old Trafford yesterday to witness Manchester United beat Liverpool 2-1. We'll talk about that next. I feel like I got to know Jeremy Cross's best friends during the last 5 minutes. What a life they lead. Should we talk...
Let's talk about United. Yeah.
Let's talk about Man United, shall we?
Change subject.
Man United 2, Liverpool 1, the race for second. What did this game mean to Mourinho, to Manchester United, to Klopp and Liverpool?
Well, in the build-up, sort of Mourinho played it down a bit, and Liverpool, I think he was having a little slide dig at Liverpool by saying it's just another game, you know. I don't get this rivalry, I don't sort of understand the culture of it all. And Klopp, in contrast, was saying it's a huge game. Look, in the scheme of things, they were both playing for second place yesterday because City are so far ahead. I mean, in seasons gone by, it would have been a title decider, but we've seen a remarkable team this season with City. But Sam was there. I think he'll agree it was a good blood and thunder game. I mean, games in the past between these two have been really, really sort of shallow and disappointing. but it was a good affair. And Liverpool gave United a 2-goal start, which was kind of them. And I think Mourinho showed what a great manager is yesterday with his tactics. He got it spot on. They were under a lot of pressure in the second half. So Rashford scored 2 great goals, and then in the second half, I thought in the first half, United, Lukaku was a handful. He bullied Lovren all in the first half and was involved in both the goals. And United looked like they could score virtually every time they decided to attack. And in the second half, it's almost like they came out and they went into that default setting of being cautious and defensive. But having said that, they did defend very well, and they came up with a plan to keep Salah quiet, and Mane was woeful, I thought. He couldn't keep the ball, he was passing it to United players. And they defended very well. They crowded Liverpool out, they made them narrow. On the edge of the box, there was so many bodies there that Liverpool just couldn't find a way through. And the goal they got was a fluky own goal. So I think it was, look, maybe there was a couple of penalty calls that could have gone Liverpool's way, but it was I think United just about edged it, and they played well.
Mourinho's tactics. People talked a lot about the way that he played that, his approach to that game. You said that it was spot on and a masterclass. But do Manchester United fans feel the same way? There were a few groans when Rashford was taken off before the standing ovation, wasn't there?
It's a curious element to United at the minute, because although they won and they beat the team they love to beat more than any other team, I think that result and that performance would have left some people with mixed feelings as they left Old Trafford. They won, and that's all that counts, I suppose, ultimately. But they did invite trouble in the second half and pressure, and Liverpool piled it on. And on another day, things could have been different. And it is a dangerous sort of tactic to use, especially against a team with Liverpool's attacking 3. But look, ultimately, Mourinho, all he's bothered about is results. He's not bothered about... He knows he can't compete with Guardiola down the road. That team play a different brand of football, a brand that no other side can come close to matching. And yeah, United are functional compared to City, but we're seeing an exceptional team in City. I mean, in another season, take City out of the equation, United would be, winning the title this season. So, look, United have a tradition of attacking gung-ho football. That is not going to happen under Mourinho, but he will win trophies in his way, and what do you want as a supporter?
Well, Neil Custis will be happy as well with the victory, won't he? He's Mourinho's cheerleader. Sam, what did Manchester United learn from that game yesterday? The importance of, Rashford, of course, his first Premier League start since Boxing Day, and the impact that he had. But what was the highlight for you?
The highlight was definitely Rashford's finish for the first goal. Was a real bit of quality in the game. As Jeremy said, it was a game of contrast in that United basically retreated to the edge of their area for the second half, and they backed themselves to keep Liverpool out, which they did. So, Mourinho will say the ends justify the means. I mean, Klopp was well and truly Mourinho'd. You could tell he knew he was falling into this trap that they'd been prized open a couple of times in quick succession, just a big clearance up the middle. When he was asked afterwards, Mourinho, about whether did you spot this weakness in Lovren, he sort of ummed and erred and then said, yeah, we knew that Lukaku could dominate him. And as soon as they got what they wanted, then they didn't want to play anymore. And it's a very complicated question, because a lot of United fans that you talk to, after the sort of... I hesitate to say the wasteland post-Ferguson, but there's undoubtedly been a decline, although there's been there's been 3 trophies. They want to get back to winning things. They want to be league challengers. They want to win league titles again, and that's understandable. And Mourinho is, on his day, excellent at the kind of bespoke tactical performance. This is what we need to do today to win this game, to get 3 points. But as a kind of sustainable way of playing football, I'm not sure. I think you can do that with Porto, and you can probably do that with the Inter Milan side. But Manchester United at home having 32% possession, it's extraordinary against Liverpool. I mean, it's a whole new world. I mean, even bad Manchester United teams or United teams that consistently fell short in the 1980s in the league, they always used to attack. So I don't think this argument's gone away. They would have left the ground really delighted, United fans, at having won that. But
hanging on.
Yes, it was hanging on, and one tiny mistake, and Liverpool would have been in for that equaliser, and then the whole edifice crumbles. But they held on, and they win the day, they win the battle. But in the long term, I can't see it flying. United backing off at home.
I mean, on Monday night, you were at Palace, weren't you, for the Palace-Man United game? And I don't know, have you heard when Palace were 2-0 up and the United fans were singing attack, attack, attack?
Yeah.
Because they were so frustrated with the way the side were playing. They're terrible. United were terrible in the first half, weren't they? They sorted things out in the second half with their 3 goals and the last-minute winner from Matic, of course. But that highlighted or that underlined the way that Manchester United played. Their own fans are saying, come on.
Well, they're
let's
frustrated,
get on
aren't
with
they?
it.
And I think Mourinho spotted that. He did make that half-time change, didn't he? I mean, I thought the way they're set up in the first instance is just not Man United, is it? We're basically, you've got Matic, McTominay and Pogba. I guess that's trying to release Pogba to be a more aggressive attacking player. But it's just not the United way. And listen, I was at that game, in my report, I was saying, look, it's smack to Fergie time and the best of Man United's traditions, but at the same time, it's the worst of United's traditions, wasn't it? Because that is a million miles away from the glorious past and the glorious recent past of Manchester United. I totally agree and see where Sam's coming from, and I think you do want to make up time, and you were saying as well that kind of it's just basically you want some trophies and you want something to cling on to. But for Manchester United, because they had the dream scenario under Sir Alex Ferguson of winning trophies, but also in doing it in style. This, I think, as befits Mourinho's career, it will only last for so long. It's only a short-term fix, it feels. It's always going to be short-term. And it felt even when Mourinho was given this new contract, a lot of people were scratching their heads and going, well, why has he been given a new contract? Because it doesn't, in every essence, feel... And I don't want to be kind of too damning on the kind of... Because Man United have won a huge game yesterday. It was a massive game for Manchester United. But you do feel that I mean, rightly so, United fans were... I didn't think it was just a smattering. I thought it was quite a loud boo when basically Rashford gets hooked yesterday, because it sends a signal we're going to shut this game down. And that's not what United are used to.
There was an incident towards the end where McTominay... United was sort of breaking and it looked like a counter-attack was developing. Then McTominay sort of checked and ended up passing the ball backwards, and the crowd actually booed him, and Mourinho came out to the side and was clapping McTominay in a sort of a stubborn sort of...
and then later...
Two fingers up to the crowd. But
and then later condemned the crowd for doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to admire his sort of... He'll take anyone on.
Yeah.
I mean, it normally takes him a while to get stuck into the fans. He did it at Chelsea as well, but he's totally fearless when you're looking at a man who is... There's no one more convinced of his own methods than Jose Mourinho, and some people like that. Some people... there is something to be admired in that, but whether it's viable in the long term, because you don't hire Jose Mourinho to come and play like Pep Guardiola. That's not what he does, and he's not going to change for anyone. He has a way that served him very well during his career, and he'd be bemused by people saying, well, we'd like to be a bit more expansive. He doesn't take requests. He does things his own way, and so. He's delivering what has delivered him. He's doing what has always delivered him success.
Yeah. Conundrum from yesterday's result, though, is fans will be asking, did we miss poor Pogba, who got injured on Friday in training and missed the game? So a lot would say, well, actually, we didn't miss Pogba yesterday. We beat Liverpool without him, and I'm not saying he's not going to get back in the side, but he's been very vocal with his praise of McTominay in recent weeks, Mourinho, which is almost like a jab in the ribs to Pogba, as if to say, raise your game, mate.
Because McTominay's a young player, wasn't expecting to be playing first-team football, and Mourinho's taken him and pulled him in, hasn't he, and said, OK, well, if you listen to me, you do the things I tell you, you'll be in the Manchester United team. So
another indictment of United's, I suppose, negativity is that their best goalkeeper and player of the year for the last 2 or 3 years has been David De Gea, the goalkeeper. When your goalkeeper's your best player in the season, then it tells you a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. One thing you've got to say about McTominay is the one thing that's always thrown at Mourinho is he doesn't develop young players. So he's done Scotland a favour there, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And
remember his infamous list when he took the job? When he came back into the press conference, didn't he, a few minutes later with a list of, I don't know, 4 players? No,
there was a lot of players on it, but it was pointed out some of them were internationals before he'd actually... Before Arjen Robben was on it, before he'd actually ever been managed by Mourinho.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be fair to him, it's great, that is great to see a player like that given the chance and supported and defended by his manager.
Yeah. OK, we need to sort Liverpool as well because they lost yesterday. What did the game say about their development under Klopp?
Well, they have been... The front three have been remarkably good, and so good, in fact, that they have not missed Coutinho. That's how good that those guys up front have been. But yesterday, I thought they were found wanting. If you can, and it sort of made me, when I was driving home from the game, I was thinking, well, basically, if you can find a way to stop Mo Salah, you can pretty much have a good crack at Liverpool and at beating them. So, other sides will look at what United did yesterday and try and go down a similar route. Oxlade-Chamberlain is not a central midfielder. I think would you agree with that?
Well, I think he's been brilliant lately.
Do you?
I think, aren't people allowed a bad day?
Played very well last weekend, didn't he?
Yeah, he was poor yesterday.
He was, but I do
look,
think generally, I think they've been good, Liverpool, haven't they? I mean, it's hard to sort of kind of on the one hand say that we want more for United, and then also then say how good Liverpool have been recently. That kind of Mourinho obviously in some of his
kind of been all bad. They had 68% of the possession yesterday.
Well, I just felt that Liverpool had a lot of the play and did some good things, but the one thing that they were found wanting was a directness. Yeah. And basically they couldn't find that end product, could they? I mean, they piled on the pressure, but United defended absolutely magnificently, and they basically gave them very, very few openings. I mean, there were 2 big claims for penalties, wasn't there, against Valencia, and then that sort of perhaps late trip by Fellaini on Mane. And I have to say, the second one, particularly if you look at it from a particular angle, it's a penalty, isn't it?
It's a good shout, yeah.
And it's... but look, Liverpool had a bad day yesterday. I think they were off form themselves, and also I think United played them brilliantly.
Of the 2 teams, Crossy, because it turned into the race for a second, but which is the better equipped to mount a genuine challenge next season in the Premier League, or this season to have a crack at the Champions League? Of course, Manchester United play Sevilla on Tuesday night.
I'm going to get slaughtered for this, but it's Liverpool, because I feel that Liverpool
on both fronts.
I do, because I think that Liverpool are more exciting. They've got more forward options, and yes, maybe I've been hooked in and hook, line, and sinker by the fact that they do play good football, and as something of a purist, I like to see good football, and they're endearing and they hook you in, and I also think that Liverpool will score goals, and they've got this ability to go and win, 4-3. I don't know whether that will bring them a European trophy this season, simply because they still look vulnerable defensively, particularly with Lovren, for example, who's exposed yesterday. But on the longer term, I feel that Liverpool are still making that progress and are catching up. And I just feel with United will always be there or thereabouts, but Liverpool seem to be pushing on. It was a bad day yesterday.
Crossy,
I disagree.
Crossy, body language is everything.
I didn't see that. I was concentrating on my point.
I know. This Crossy moved further and further away from you, scrunched his face up, scratched his head.
No, I
obviously
respect John's view.
Win the Premier League title and Champions League.
I just think United's main advantage, they have a manager who has won it twice before. I'm referring to the Champions League. I think the Premier League argument is futile, because I think you could get used to seeing City being champions for, the next 2 or 3 years at least, I would imagine.
They're talking about Pep staying for 10 years now as well. So.
Well, he said on at his press conference ahead of the game that he can't see himself creating a dynasty there, because he don't think he's got the mental energy to stay there for 10 years. But back to United, I think United are better equipped than Liverpool. I think they've got a better defence. I think Liverpool are vulnerable at the back, even though they've spent 70 million on a centre-back. And I think Mourinho knows. I've got a sneaking feeling they're the dark horse in the Champions League this season. I think they might go deep.
They've got to be severe on Tuesday night, Sam.
Well, United aren't even through to the quarter-finals yet, are they? So if you were looking at it from a bookie's point of view, you'd say Liverpool are a significant step further ahead. I think early years Mourinho is always strong. Yeah. But as a way of playing, as a kind of belief in what football's about, I think it's not Klopp for the long term. Is I just don't think Klopp will ever have the resources to buy the top players for the way he wants to play, and he'll always lose players. Yeah. That's going to be his problem.
Sure. OK, good stuff, boys. We're going to go to the foot of the table next. We're going to talk Alan Pardew. Is he still in the job? Is he going to stay in that job? We'll tell you next. Welcome back with us this morning, Sam Wallace, Jeremy Cross and John Cross. Sam was just telling me what the running order was. Happy with the running order, Sam?
Yeah, let's go. We're ready to go.
OK, can I do the papers?
Go for it.
Excellent. Just remind you what's in the papers. It's the Hammers' day of shame, 4 pitch invasions, criticism, fans threatening the owners. The ground could be closed. That could be the punishment. When the FA, they've already launched their investigation along with the Premier League. Anarchy at the London Stadium. That's the Sunday Mirror this morning. Revolting is the headline in the Sunday People. The Sunday Telegraph, which is Sam's paper, the West Ham anarchy, as the fans run riot. We discussed that in part 1. We've just been talking about this man, this star turn who'll be named in the England squad, Gareth Southgate's squad, on Thursday for games against Italy and Holland. Rashford's star turn scored twice yesterday against Liverpool at Old Trafford. Andy Dunn's column, good friend of ours here on the show, and a regular, of course. I spy England's fading World Cup stars, too many of them not playing on the substitutes bench for their Premier League sides. We'll come on to that. We'll have a chat about England in part 4 of today's programme. But let's talk about some of the managers struggling at the foot of the table. Let's first off talk about Alan Pardew. His bags were packed a couple of weeks ago, Crossy. Lost again yesterday. This is a big defeat this time at the Hawthorns. Do they stick or do they twist? What's going to happen?
Well, look, I do like Alan Pardew, and I thought he'd make a difference at West Brom. But of all the clubs that have changed their managers, he's the one that's not even given them any kind of new manager bounce. His recent record is absolutely shocking. It's his personal record, bearing in mind obviously he had a wretched run at Palace beforehand. We were into sort of kind of one winning. I mean, it's
one
ridiculous.
Winning 15 in the Premier League.
It's absolutely remarkable run, that, and you wonder where the next win is going to come from. It felt like the jungle drums were banging and sort of kind of rumbling a couple of weeks ago, and then he was given that kind of ultimatum, it felt like, at Watford. It's kind of win or bust, and then it didn't quite happen like that, and they lost anyway.
He survived.
Absolutely, and so he survives again, and that defeat yesterday, I thought was shocking. I mean, it brings into practice. We're pretending like West Brom are perennial strugglers in the Premier League. Well, that's not the case. And look and pick apart their squad. It's in my mind, it's a mid-table squad. And Tony Pulis had a wretched run, and then basically they were fourth from bottom, I think, when they dismissed him. And basically now, the West Brom are cut adrift under Alan Pardew. And the fans have been used to. They don't want the earth, but I think that they are frustrated and fed up with this myth that basically West Brom are perennial strugglers. Is not the case at all, and West Brom, to find themselves adrift at the bottom is just unforgivable with that group of players, and something has gone seriously wrong there. I think for Alan Pardew then to come out after the game and basically even admit that maybe basically even some of the players are giving up at this stage, I think is one hell of an admission. And if they don't change it this week, then they never will, particularly on the back of what kind of Pardew was saying was post-match. I mean, they just look an absolute shambles. But to suggest that West Brom haven't got that quality, or Premier League quality of squad, is just a nonsense, and something has gone seriously wrong there. It's interesting in the week, my colleague James Nurse wrote, basically even the West Brom players are amazed that Pardew hasn't been sacked. And frankly, I don't know what's happened with Pardew, because I do genuinely think he's been scarred by recent experiences, because I thought he would give them a lift. he would come in with a slightly more attractive and sort of bouncier sort of style
Well, that's
of football.
what he said he was going to do.
Absolutely, and I thought he would do that, and I thought that he would lift them clear. And it's just got progressively worse and worse and worse. The players, in their performances, you can see, have given up. They actually started quite well, but as soon as Vardy scores that goal, and by the way, goal of the season, absolutely. I mean, it was just, they've given up, they switch off. And West Brom, for me, are down, and that's a disgrace that a team as good as that can go down.
Wasn't a bad goal, was it?
Left foot.
Was it goal of the season?
Yeah. Well,
It's always at these points you struggle to remember.
it's going to
the
take
goals
some beating, that. I mean, the ball from Mahrez
You like
was
Rashford's
sensational
yesterday?
in
You like
itself.
Rashford's first goal yesterday?
Yeah, but that was mediocre compared to Vardy's.
Was it?
Coming over his shoulder and to hit through it like that with his left foot. When
No,
he's a
but
right-footed
Rashford,
player.
what do we take into account?
I
goal
mean,
of the
people
season? 'Cause
complain about
I
Route
take-
1 football, but I'll take that all day long.
But I think you have to take quality of the opposition, standing of the game, stature of the game,
But
what level it was
no
at.
defence could have stopped that. That was just one of those freakishly good goals, right?
It's an amazing goal. I think it's goal of the season all day long.
Sam,
what
what are your
Pardew
requirements?
needs, really.
What are your requirements for goal of the season?
Well, I like
for
to
goals of
see.
the
I like
season?
to see a bit of a dribble first, and I've
gonna
always,
say
I've
Giggsy,
always,
aren't you? Say
I've always,
Giggsy, Man United
I've always
against
taken it.
Arsenal, aren't you?
I'm racking my brains now. I'd struggled to put that as my number. Of course, it was an unusual goal. It was with his weaker foot, and it was. I think when we were watching it last night, he didn't actually look at the goal, did he? He had to keep his eye on the ball all the way. So it was an unusual goal. I think there will be better ones this season. But that doesn't diminish it. What a good goal it was. And but I'm not prepared to throw my
Please
hat in.
digress.
People go to watch strikers banging in goals, don't they? That's what you love to see, and that was right up there.
I thought Dybala's finish against Tottenham on Wednesday night was special.
Yeah, and
Pressure.
Dybala is a special player. I mean, he's not even fully fit, but the technique during that game that he showed, the control, the ball's glued to his foot, and that finish, it was amazing in the Champions League
It was a
stage.
carbon copy of the goal that he scored against Cagliari on the opening day of the season, of course, in Serie A, wasn't it?
Yes, of course it was, Neil.
It was. Look it up. It actually was. Let's finish off.
Someone's just told you that in your ear.
No, they're amazing that they haven't. They're laughing in my ear about that. Actually, how would he know that? You've got to watch the Juventus documentary on Netflix. That's and then you'll see that goal. I thought you'd have seen it by now. Let's finish off on Pardew. Does he survive? Does he survive this? Is there anything he can do?
No, I
in
think-
terms of the responsibility of West Brom's players, do they have to be held to account here as well?
They do. They, like John said, they basically, when they go behind, they capitulate. They're just down tools. There was evidence of that yesterday. That's been this recurring theme for weeks and weeks and months even now, and he's been there since October. I know we keep banging on about this Taxigate thing, and while you can sort of smirk and laugh and think, what
Johnny Evans said it was
what a load of press.
overblown.
Well, I think
Sensationalised.
that the fact that Johnny Evans, who is captain, thinks that is not much of a misdemeanour tells you all you need to know about what is going on in that dressing room at West Brom, doesn't it? Really? I mean, you know, that is just such a foolish thing to do. But they clearly don't care, and they don't want to do it for Pardew. And look, he's probably going to be sacked by the time we finish this programme, maybe.
Yeah.
But
It doesn't look
But,
good. does
but
it?
what? I don't know what their options are. Where would they turn? But what have they got to lose by sacking him and bringing someone else in? They've got nothing to lose whatsoever.
Yeah, be pretty desperate if they do, but it's a desperate situation, of course. Want to have a little chat about Southampton as well, Sam, because my favourite stat, or the amazing stat, is that Pellegrino's won one game in 17 in the Premier League, and Southampton aren't in the bottom three, amazingly enough. They're only out of bottom three because they're a point ahead of Crystal Palace, who lost yesterday at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea. But what's going on there? Such a well-run,
yes,
such a well-run, organised club. Of course.
A club that we've admired over the years.
All started, of course, by sorry.
But you were about to say the previous regime. Give them some credit. I think I feel a little bit differently to the chaps about West Brom, as I feel about Southampton. Is that none of these clubs really have a kind of what would you say a kind of season ticket to the Premier League. There are I don't know 10, 12, maybe as many as 13 clubs, probably 12 clubs who start the season thinking if things go really badly we could go down. They're quite delicate organisms, clubs like Southampton and West Brom. They have to get recruitment right. They have to get the right manager. So what's happened to Southampton? Well, they had two managers who were both successively poached by Premier League clubs. I can't remember the last time that happened to another club. So we're talking
get picked off as well.
Pochettino and Koeman. There's Southampton 11s out there that that could win the Premier League if they were all. But of course, I mean, if you talk to people at Southampton, they'll say, well, that's nonsense because, if we hadn't sold Dejan Lovren to Liverpool, we would have never have signed Virgil van Dijk. So it's all about the succession. But there's no doubt that over the years, they've done brilliantly. They've signed great players, and the Lee Pear family, who sort of rescued the club when it was in League One, they put a lot of money in, and they needed that money had to come back. So they had to run on a certain budget, which meant that if you get offered 75 million for Virgil van Dijk, ultimately you're going to sell him. And for years and years, they were probably one of the most admired clubs in the Premier League, and we would sit here on the supplement and say how great they were. They're going through a tough patch. They've probably, the last two managerial appointments have not quite worked out as they would have hoped. And their faith in their system is being tested, and the fans are upset as well because they're not used to this. But I think that fundamentally they are a well-run club. They're a good club. They give young players a chance. They scout well, and they try to do the right thing. But to go back to my first point, I'm afraid that it's hard to repeat the trick over and over again. And now they're in a survival situation. Pellegrino was always a brave choice. He's a very cerebral, very kind of different manager to what a lot of those players would be used to. And he's obviously very, very vulnerable. I think their run of games is looking pretty. I think after the next one, it's grim. There's quite a lot of big teams
But
coming
the home
up.
form's been really poor, so that I don't know.
Yes.
Sam, why was Pellegrino chosen? Because if you look back at his CV, there's nothing there to justify. I don't think, in my point of view, to justify being given a club like Southampton. We're not talking about we're talking about a well-established kind of Premier League club, which is incredibly well run. Yes, they do make some, sort of educated gambles, shall we say. Even Pochettino, you could argue, was, but it went from strength to strength. And so they obviously get their recruitment right. But if you look at what Pellegrino has done in the past, there's nothing there to suggest that he would be worthy, in my view, of a club of the expectation and size of Southampton.
But he had quite a good season. His last season at Alaves, didn't he get them to the cup final? And I know what you're saying. I think probably a little bit of what Saints are looking for is they're looking for the next Pochettino, aren't they? Because he was such a roaring success, and yeah, that was Cortese's appointment. I accept that was not the current regime.
You didn't need to say that.
And Koeman was perfect, the right man at the right time. He was a big name who came in that season, that summer where they sold a lot of players, and he commanded respect. And actually, I think he was a much better fit for Southampton than he ever was at Everton. So I think a little bit of what a club always does when it appoints a manager is it looks at the ones that it got right and it tries to replicate that. And I agree with you that in the cold light of day, Pellegrino's CV maybe doesn't stack up. But last summer, they thought maybe he's the next Pochettino, and I think that was probably where that came from.
Now and take your chances.
Could win the FA Cup. They're in the quarter-final next week.
Yeah, it's all about a replacement. I mean, at West Brom, I think West Brom have got a replacement in Appleton. I think Michael Appleton, he's managed the club before. Yeah. He's got a lot of experience.
He's a good coach.
He knows English football really well.
The players like him too.
Yeah.
Tough times for Southampton, but of course they are on the FA Cup quarter-final next weekend. They play Wigan, of course, who beat Manchester City. OK, next up, there's an England squad. It's been announced on Thursday by Gareth Southgate. Big games coming up against Italy and Holland. More on that next. OK, let's talk about Gareth Southgate's squad. He'll name it on Thursday at St George's Park for those games against Italy and Holland, guys. What's the big issue for you? These two, they're high-profile fixtures, aren't they? There's no unquestionably. It's Southgate's first opportunity to work with the squad this year. What will he be looking for? The major issue, I guess, or one of them, is the keepers.
Goalkeepers and centre halves for me. I do think.
OK, let's start with the keeper because Joe Hart back in goal yesterday for West Ham.
Joe Hart, yeah, and look,
big mistake for the third goal.
Yeah, but when you say big mistake, it was a mistake.
Okay, a mistake.
But he's basically.
Another mistake.
Well, I just feel that Joe Hart, I couldn't quite understand why he's been out of the West Ham team for so long. Bearing in mind that he was dropped on mistakes that Adrian, let's be honest, has made a little while. But so I felt that Hart's return has been a little bit overdue. But I do think if Hart is not has not been playing going into the World Cup, and if he loses his place again, then I do think Gareth Southgate, who has said on several occasions this season that Hart is his number one, will have to look elsewhere. And I think if he makes that choice, Jack Butland, then I'm sure Jack Butland would admit that he's not been anywhere near his best. And I think when Jack Butland is at his best, then I think there's an England goalkeeper, England number one in there. But he's not been playing well. I mean, I do think he's been looking at Pope at Burnley, and rightly so. He's been at Burnley for a few games. But, Fraser Forster has lost his place. It's where on earth do you turn? Jordan Pickford, I don't think, has covered himself in glory this season. I mean, he's been exposed in a few times. It's a real issue for this, and I think ideally you'd want to give a goalkeeper is a unique position, and I think a lot of goalkeepers will say, I want to be sure that I'm number one and have that extra confidence and belief that a manager gives you by picking you and making you that number one. I don't think it's always healthy to kind of be unsure and sort of fighting for your position. I think history tells us that's not always the case with goalkeepers. I think Gareth Southgate has got massive issues there. I mean, the playing time throughout the squad and throughout the team is a serious concern. I think the last meaningful competitive game we had at Wembley last year, I think it was Slovenia, and basically hardly anyone, because we'd qualified that night, and then hardly anyone has kept their place since. I mean, you go right throughout the team, who's playing well and who's an absolute nailed-on regular in their team. Harry Kane, Raheem Sterling, Carl Walker.
But Raheem's been out, of course.
Well,
he's injured. But,
Eric Dyer.
Eric Dyer, yeah, but, is he... I think Eric Dyer will start the World Cup, first game of the World Cup, absolutely. But is he as good this season as he has been in previous couple of seasons? Even that's a debate. But look, Eric Dyer, I think, is stitched on for the World Cup, and hopefully Spurs will have their usual and have a really good run in, because then that will give them some belief. And I think we need that, because looking forward to getting a good, successful England team, Tottenham need to be firing because they're providing most of it, and hopefully that will mean a return.
You're finding that hard to say,
Southgate.
No, Renaissance.
Southgate has two choices with the goalkeeper situation. Can either stick with Hart, who he started the last England game, which was Brazil, was it? Yeah. Yep. And have faith in Hart, or pick one from the pool of the other choices. But if he goes with the second option, he will be picking a goalkeeper who's woefully inexperienced, and that is a big ask at a World Cup. That's a tough and brutal induction, that.
Yeah. Centre halves, Crossy mentioned. This is Crossy. John Stones on the subs bench for Manchester City at the moment. Is that an issue?
I think Stones has massively improved as a player. He's playing for one of the best, one of the top teams in Europe, who've just spent a record on Laporte, haven't they? Who's pretty much taken his... I know Company's played a bit.
He played the last game, the Champions League game, Stones.
Yeah, but the game against Basel?
Yeah.
But that was just it was...
Yeah, no, prior to that, he'd not played.
Yeah.
He had a few niggles and stuff. He didn't start
against Arsenal or Chelsea.
It is an issue.
I kind of think Southgate has said right from the start that being England manager in this day and age, you are going to have to pick players who aren't necessarily playing every week. I mean, obviously Cahill's... I think he played yesterday, but he's not been in the Chelsea team.
Danny Rose.
So I think that Stones is one of those that you have to take into account just the level of competition he's up against. And he does play. He doesn't play every game, but he does play occasionally. And I think you're just going to have to live with that, really. I think, given that pretty much all of our players, all of England's players, play in the Premier League and play at clubs where there is intense competition. There's others that you look at. Harry Maguire. I mean, he started both those games against Brazil and Germany. He plays every week, and so
there's only him and Carl Walker, don't there?
Yes.
Of the defensive unit that are playing regularly.
I mean, the ones that have really disappeared are Harry Winks was really part of that. I mean, he's still fit, but doesn't always seem to get on the bench. And obviously Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who made a good impression in that first game against Germany, he's injured, isn't he? So a lot of these players, I think. Yeah, but also Lallana. I mean, Lallana and Henderson both started on the bench, and I think Jurgen Klopp would always assume that Lallana's a first choice. I think Southgate would. The issue is watching him in that Champions League game against Porto. he's obviously a long way off match fitness, and the only way he's going to get that is by playing games. And at this stage of the season, I don't think he can afford to have someone catching up in the way that he needs to. So that's going to be the worry for those two. But I'll go back to my original point about Stones. I think with Lallana, with Stones, you just have to accept that they're in Champions League squads where there's a lot of competition, and England just have to keep faith in them.
Yeah, OK. Up front as well, Glenn Murray, has he got a chance? He's got a shot at this? Keep scoring?
Seemingly he has. I mean, at 34 years of age, it would be a remarkable call-up for Gareth Southgate, but there are whispers that he will do it. I think he'll get pelters, frankly, if Gareth Southgate calls him up, because
who you think Gareth
Southgate would?
From us or the supporters?
Well, a bit of both, really, because we'll be saying, well, if you've got to turn to him. I mean, at times this season, the criticism of Brighton is that they've been struggling for goals, and yes, he's been in a purple patch of form, but it would be a remarkable, turn to a 34-year-old who, at times this season, we thought, oh, blimey, Brighton better replace him if they really want to stay up. And yes, he's been sort of really on fire and been scoring.
And he has responded to the competition of strikers, hasn't he?
Well, he has, and he's done well.
He's talked about
Neil, there was a priceless moment last Sunday at Brighton during the Arsenal game when Brighton were under pressure as Arsenal was seeking an equaliser. The ball was played up to him, and basically he's then turned, pushed it past Mustafi, and he's through on goal, and sort of 5 yards into Arsenal's half, and.
He's not the first player to do that, is he?
Well, no, it's an open invitation this season, let's be honest. But then basically what he's had to do is he's turned to come back because basically he's realised I'm going to look silly here if I try and run on goal, even against Mustafi, who is by no means quick. In fact, he's a long way from being quick. And he had to hold up the play.
Arsenal in part 5.
But he's had to hold up the play and bring it back. He's that slow. And I'm sorry, but I don't mean to take away from what Glenn Murray has achieved this season, and fair play to him, and he's been absolutely remarkable. But if he gets called up on Thursday, sorry, but that is going to be a dark day for England and their World Cup hopes. It really is.
What would we do if Harry Kane got injured?
Yeah.
Where would we be if he had got injured?
You said a goal of the season earlier. Now you don't want him in England.
Yeah, but he wouldn't do it for
Jamie
England,
Vardy is stitched on for the England World Cup squad.
Yeah.
He is a player that every week surprises me, and he's got a spirit and indomitable spirit that you cannot deny. He's absolutely fantastic, and I think his determination and desire will be great for England's World Cup.
In terms of attacking options, we don't run deep, do we? I don't think.
No, you can say that about the rest of the team and the rest of the other areas on the pitch, can you? OK, next up, we're going to talk about North London. It's Tottenham. They lost against Juventus in the week. Also talk about Arsenal and Arsene Wenger. Coming next. It all feels like such a long time ago, but Tottenham did lose in the Champions League on Wednesday night, Jeremy, against Juventus. What were your thoughts on the way that Tottenham approached the game over the two legs, and of course what happened, Chiellini's comments subsequently, the way that Pochettino handled himself after the game, the way that he talked, and the way that Tottenham's players and the club need to, or do they need to recover at all from this game?
Well, actually, I thought they played really well over two legs
and everyone would
against
say
a top team.
But they're out.
But they're out, and that shows the difference that's the ground they still have to make up if they want to reach that level that Juventus are at, which is a streetwise top European side who regularly go deep in the Champions League. I thought they were a bit naive, Tottenham, to be honest, and they were caught out. Look, I don't think it will have any impact on the rest of their season league-wise.
But does it create doubt among the squad? Will they look at that, having been in such a strong position from the first leg, having scored twice in Turin, having drawn that game 2-2, to then be in front at Wembley and then lose the game in the circumstance they did? You said that they were naive.
It could do,
because
they have a young side, Tottenham, so it could affect some of the younger players. And they may look at their manager. I know Pochettino is quite revered, really, isn't he? Which I don't buy into, really, but I think he badly needs to win a trophy, Pochettino. Him and Klopp are the two managers who badly need to win that first piece of silverware.
OK, he's revered by most, but not by you. Why?
Well, I just think I mean, look, they went out in the week and he didn't get the same amount of stick that, say, Mourinho would have got if he'd have gone out with... You know, if United go out on Tuesday to Seville, Mourinho will get a bucket load of stick. And I think Pochettino does get away with that in that respect.
And what's the difference?
Between what?
But why would Mourinho get...
I don't know. I think he gets an easy ride. Pochettino's a charming fellow, isn't he? He gets on well with the media. He plays the PR game well. And, you know, he's a likeable bloke.
There's not a question Mourinho won't answer.
Well, Mourinho picks fights with anyone and everyone. So, you know, and it's very fractious with him sometimes. Doesn't seem to be that way with Pochettino. The issue Tottenham have is they don't pay their big players enough money. So... I know Kane is the obvious example, but do you think he will look at somebody like Kyle Walker and think, right, that guy has left Tottenham, he's gone to Man City, he's going to win 2 trophies this season, maybe 3. He's trebled his wages, life is brilliant for Kyle Walker. Does Kane not want something like that? In a couple of years' time, is he going to be thinking, well, if they've not won a trophy in another 2 or 3 seasons, Tottenham, where does that leave players like Dele Alli and Harry Kane if they're not earning what they're earning?
Pochettino, we were both at the press conference, weren't we, on Tuesday, ahead of the Juventus game. Pochettino did get a little bit knocked. It was Ian Laderman, wasn't it, asked him about the need to win trophies, and you could sense he didn't like the question at all. And I wouldn't say I can understand why, but I do think that if you are judging managers on things beyond trophies, on progress, then you do have to say that Pochettino has made remarkable progress with Tottenham as a football club and Tottenham as a team. They are making huge strides forward, and he has taken a team which has always been on the edges, on the outskirts of pushing for top 4, and sometimes they've missed out. But now you would say, if you're naming your top 4, Spurs will be in it, and that, I think, is a huge achievement. Sorry, I felt for a long time that the days of kind of, when we hark back to kind of, I don't know, the 80s, the 90s, when you had to win trophies and everything was about silverware, are gone. Compared today with yesteryear, is pointless. Football's changed, it's evolved, it's moved on.
There's a big part. Net spend. He's hardly spent. I think if you look, I think he spent about 40 million.
30
over something like 6 windows. It's an amazing achievement.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time when the top 4 were so established, were cut adrift. He's forced Tottenham into that. He's pulled them up, and of course, you know, Klopp's the same. I mean, Klopp's more or less in the black following the Coutinho sale. I think. And of course, these managers would always have it thrown at them, especially when Mourinho and Guardiola just have won so much in a relatively short space of time, and that's to be admired as well. I think they've got a different skill set, Pochettino Club. They've managed to get a lot out of players. That doesn't diminish what Guardiola and Mourinho are doing, but Pochettino has done that without spending huge amounts of money. And he has lost players. He's lost Kyle Walker as well. And he's brought young players through. And I think there's a lot to be admired in that. And just because, you know, he hasn't won a trophy and Mourinho wins them relentlessly, well, you can admire Mourinho for what he does. But that doesn't mean that you have to measure everyone by the same yardstick. And you can still say that Pochettino has achieved things without going that final... Yes, of course, eventually, as a manager, he'll want to look back on a career with trophies in it, of course. But what he's done at Tottenham, the bigger picture, expectations have risen dramatically for that club. He's spent very little money and taken them up into a side that finished second last year, which I think is an achievement.
Yeah.
Do you think he's a good manager then?
Yeah, I do.
A great manager?
I think he's a good manager and he's a young manager, and I think you only need to look at this summer. Real Madrid will want him, PSG will want him, and of course he will always have the trophy thing thrown at him. But there's no doubt he's a good manager and he'll get better.
What is there a view for? I mean, on Pochettino, because we spend a lot of time watching Tottenham matches, being around Pochettino. Is there a London media mafia thing going on?
I don't know, because I live in the north.
I know. That's why I'm asking you the question.
You tell me, guys.
Is that what you see? Is that what you see?
I don't know. I'm just comparing what it's like, say, in and around United and clubs like that, in terms of how much criticism occurs when games are lost, and I don't think it's the same with Pochettino.
If it's all about trophies...
But that's because you said that he's got good PR.
Well, look, I don't know the guy that well, but
But from what you see, that would be
he
that
comes
would be one of
across
the
as a
explanations.
charming guy, and he's obviously a bright guy and an intelligent fella. And like Sam said, he's doing a lot of good things with Tottenham. But the key is, like Sam said, expectations level are now through the roof with Tottenham. And they are that they want to start winning things. Because ultimately, yeah, as a football supporter, they don't want to see a trophy on the table. They want to see a parade at the ground. And the clock's ticking on Pochettino. That's my only point
Love
about
it.
that.
Okay. Shall we?
Well,
It's time.
it's time.
And not a lot of it. Well, we shall. Let's do it.
The point I was
Andy
going to make
Dunn's
before
comment.
was basically if it's all about trophies, then Arsene Wenger wouldn't be in trouble because he's won 3 FA Cups in the last 4
There you
years.
go.
And then the same
Thanks for watching.
the same Arsenal fans who basically, probably want Arsene Wenger out are the ones that going, oh well, hang on a minute, isn't it time that Pochettino won something? Well, you're judging it on trophies by the same standards. Why are you on Arsene Wenger's back then? It's
This century, Tottenham have won 1 trophy. Arsenal have won 8 or 10, I think.
well,
This century.
in fact, Arsenal
there
have won a
you go.
trophy in the last 10 months.
There you
Tottenham have
go.
won a trophy in the last 10 years.
and what's the perception? Is that basically Arsenal should make a change this summer? Listen, I think the likelihood is that they will, but I do think that is your answer back, isn't it? That basically Pochettino keeps on saying, do trophies matter? Do domestic cups matter? Well, apparently not. Because you can't have it on the one hand that they don't matter and then basically say, well, Wenger must go because he's won 3 FA Cups in 4 years.
Do you have? How do you feel about Wenger operate? He's been at Arsenal for such a long time.
Yeah.
Whatever people say that our views on him and how we feel about whether he should stay or not. However, this guy has been at that football club for a long time, and of course, when he does go, he will get the credit for the amazing work that he did, particularly in the first half of his Arsenal career. But there are relentless stories. There's another one about Joachim Löw in the Mail on Sunday. Rob Draper's written today. How will Wenger feel about working in those conditions with managers continually being linked with his job?
He hates it. Absolutely hates it. I mean, a few years ago, Klopp was being linked with Arsenal before he went to Liverpool, and I always remember going to a press conference and there was a pretty blunt question from TV that basically sort of said, well, Klopp's being linked with your job. How do you feel about that? And I mean, how do you expect him to feel? I mean, it was just, it was maybe clumsily worded, but it was basically, he got very, very uppity about it and very kind of personally
entitled
insulted.
to do.
Absolutely, and I thought it was disrespectful, in bearing in mind basically what he's achieved and what do you want him to say? What can he possibly say? Look, this will go on and on and on until the end of the season, when I do think the likelihood is, as I say, they'll make the change.
Sure, OK.